Typically, academics are very good at doing discovery research, but we're not trained, particularly in the biosciences, to take these discoveries and do the necessary applied science to move them forward so they can be converted into new drugs or new diagnostics that are really important to patients with unmet medical needs. So Spark exists to help with this. We try and do a few things to make this process more likely to happen. My name is Kevin Grimes. I'm a professor of chemical and systems biology and a practicing clinician here at Stanford. I'm also the co-director of the Spark program. The Spark program exists because there are all sorts of fantastic discoveries that are happening on this university every day. One is we make funding available, although the level of funding we make available is fairly modest. Usually there's a deficit in funding available for doing this applied science stage. Federal grants tend to fund more basic research or sometimes later stage clinical trials, but not really this spot that academia has not traditionally done. The second thing that we do is try and provide expertise and knowledge on the process of translating these basic research discoveries and advancing them so that they can become drugs. There are probably a dozen different applied science disciplines that need to be crossed to successfully make this happen. And the way we fill this information or knowledge gap is we work with folks from our local biotech community. We have over 100 volunteers from the local biotechnology industry who very generously donate their time and their expertise to help us succeed. Third thing that we're working on in Spark is we're trying to make the process more efficient. In spite of all of the resources, financial and otherwise, that are put into drug discovery nowadays, our success rate, even when we get as advanced as the point of doing clinical studies in humans, our success rate is quite low. Only about 15% of drugs that we bring into human study eventually move forward and are approved by the FDA. And what we hope to do is take a more systems-based approach, human-based approach, rather than just reductive science, bring together some of the tools that modern science has made available, and increase our success in identifying important new targets and in improving the process so we're more likely to succeed in bringing the drugs all the way to FDA approval so that the patients will benefit. A typical Spark meeting is, in my opinion, really fun. What you will see are PhD students who are typically in their 20s, interspersed with middle-aged and older individuals from the biotech community and the faculty. And what you'll see is really an interesting dialogue ongoing. When we do project updates, we will have our project teams who will present very briefly what they've been trying to accomplish, but more importantly, what they've been able to do and what their challenges have been over the prior several months. And then they will get feedback from the advisors in the audience and from their peers and from the faculty in the audience, and they tend to be very lively discussions. We do not have much of a hierarchy. First-year PhD student would have equal standing with a Nobel laureate. I think our advisors who have the experience of actually developing drugs are the folks who have the most authority in the room, but we have very lively discussions. We don't try and force a consensus, but we try and really share the information so that our teams can decide what direction they're going to take to move things forward. There are two things. One is, of course, making new therapies available to individuals who have unmet medical needs. So advancing a drug that has the potential to help, a child with recurrent brain cancer, for example, is a really gratifying thing to be able to do. The other thing that I really like about Spark is the collaborative nature. It really brings out the best in people, people's ingenuity, people's creativity in coming up with ideas, and equally important, people's generosity in sharing their expertise and knowledge so that we can make something good happen for the world. So The Spark program, briefly, I'd say about half of the projects that graduate from Spark within a year or two end up going on to commercial partnerships, which is really critical to get over that expensive phase of doing clinical trials and ultimately getting FDA approval and getting to patients. So that in and of itself, I think, is really an important milestone. Another 10% of these projects we'll bring into the clinic ourselves, particularly ones that are not going to be attractive to the financial community, that are going to be good for patients, and we'll find other ways, public-private partnerships or doing clinical trials here at the university to advance those. What we hope to do is continue to maintain a sort of a similar rate of success and to move these projects towards the patients who need them. The secret sauce of Spark is really threefold. One is really bright people, great research scientists who are coming up with ideas and advancing them. Two is sort of a passion to make this happen. Particularly, we see this with our physician scientists who go down the scientific route because they have patients who they really want to help, and they combine this motivation to help their patients with their scientific acumen to come up with these new discoveries and move them forward. And the third is really the generosity of our advisors and their willingness to share their expertise and knowledge. So it's really a unique combination, and I think that's what accounts for our success. I hope we continue to advance new projects to patients. The Spark Global program, we are trying to share our expertise and our methodologies with other institutions in the world. I hope that we can become very efficient at sharing our learning among the institutions so that each of us become more efficient and better at what we do. Lastly, what I hope that we can do is really improve the process. I mentioned earlier about trying to bring different types of science together, systems biology and omics, as well as reductive science, to identify important new targets. This is going to be a very important thing to improve our efficiency moving forward. But we need to extend beyond that as well and take on some of the policy issues. Currently, almost all drug development is done by the for-profit sector. Yet there are very frequently opportunities to develop therapeutics that are not going to be financially rewarding, but are going to be good for patients. An example would be developing a cell-based therapy for IPEX syndrome, which one of our faculty is doing in Spark currently. There are only about 20 kids in the country per year with that disorder. Certainly not enough to justify a company per se, but nonetheless very important for those kids. And coming up with models for supporting these not-for-profit approaches to bring therapeutics to the people who need them is going to be important. So we need to think about financial engineering. Another example would be developing antibiotics for resistant bugs, where it's in the best interest of the world for those drugs to be used as minimally as possible. Therefore, perhaps not a for-profit endeavor, but we need to come up with more public ways of funding these programs. I hope that we can make interventions in those spaces. And then a third example would be how we might impact regulatory policy. The dean of our medical school is very excited about precision health, which is a step beyond precision medicine. It's actually keeping people healthy. Yet our current regulatory pathways require evidence of clinical benefit before something can be approved. In the case of prevention, that might be a clinical trial that lasts 10 or 20 years. And those trials, quite honestly, are too expensive. They're not going to happen. So we need to think of ways of how might we find new ways to approve drugs. Maybe it's with some surrogate biomarker that correlates with disease activity plus a registry. But there are a lot of ways that we can intervene to make it more efficient and more likely that patients who need new therapeutics are going to receive them.